If you were to use 1,000 words to describe the masterpiece that is more Orel, I'm pretty sure that sweet would not be one of them. Especially in the first 2 seasons, where any sense of sweetness, such as Orel's dog, is immediately destroyed by the surrounding denizens of Moralton. However, as the series approached its 3rd season, and characters began to get the end of their stories, there is a stark divide between those who get a good ending and those who get something else. And out of everybody's final major appearance, I'm not sure that anybody gets a happier ever after than the focus of Season 3, Episode 6, Dumb. And that's what we're talking about today. In this video, we're going to go through all 11 minutes of the objectively darkest subject matter I've ever talked about on this channel, and discuss how, by finding each other, Joe and Nurse Bendy finally escape their troubled past and begin to heal.
I sure hope I don't take after you. Boy, I'd hate to be old all the time.
You won't be.
Just like a good chunk of the episodes in the show's 3rd season, Dumb kicks off, ends with, and is interspersed with the same song, namely Failsafe by The Choir Practice, a song that features somebody singing to a kid about the desire to give up at the first instance of a struggle, but also the immense reward possible if you stick it out anyway. This song becomes pretty evident in its ties to the episode pretty quickly, but first we get a look into the house of the rarely seen Dr. Second Opinionson and his son, Joe, who's the series-long, pretty stereotypical bully to Orel's jolly self. While throughout the series there are a few hints that Joe's jerkish exterior is a result of something back in his home life, it's not until this episode where we finally start to see the pieces of his childhood that created the character we've seen torture Orel for 3 seasons. The first conversation between Joe and his father in this one occurs right after the school play from the previous season, as Joe laments his father's lack of attendance as a result of his old age-induced lack of mobility. This begins a recurring theme of the episode, as Joe blames everything in his life on the age of his parents, as not only does he believe that his father's age is the reason that he's not been able to do typical dad things with him, but also the lie that he was told that his mother somehow passed away from old age during childbirth. More on that later, but first, as Joe goes to eat copious amounts of sugar, something that his former doctor of a father is in no shape to stop him from doing, we see the 3rd member of the Second Opinionson household, his daughter and Joe's half-sister, whose deep voice that she only shows around family is a great source of comedy for the episode. Although, in conjunction with this episode's later reveal of her inability to have children, definitely opens the door to some theories about why she would keep it a secret in a town as religious as Moralton. As she talks to her father about the continued worsening of his mind, she gets a call from none other than Nurse Bendy, who calls to inquire about Joe's life. And after being slowly told about his recent participation in the school's play, we see her and her teddy bear son from Alone celebrating as if he was the one who was in the play, as the identity of Joe's secret mother becomes pretty evident. Well, the first scene in this episode likely made you feel bad for Joe's father, as he's berated by his son for his physical inability to do things with him. The reveal of his mother being Nurse Bendy, a character hinted at in an unproduced episode to only be 12 years older than Joe, completely diminishes any sense of sympathy for the character. Going back a few episodes to Alone, an episode that makes the fact that one of Bendy's teddy bears is taped to a chair completely devastating, we know that Bendy being frequently used as an object is what has launched her into her childlike demeanor. And knowing that it was Dr. Second Opinionson who first catapulted her into this state makes the audience horrified, and constantly waiting for some type of justice. Before that comes, Joe has a quick conversation with Orel, who reveals that he and his father are about to go on a definitely fun hunting trip, something that Joe doesn't even pretend to not be jealous of. of. Eventually, their conversation evolves into Joe trying to hide his immense fear of growing older, something that makes sense given his interpretation that that's the reason that both of his parents can't actually take care of him. Orel can't help but feel sorry for Joe as he makes his way to go see his uncle, Coach Stopframe, as he continues to try and find somebody who can actually be the parent he so desperately needs. Unfortunately though, Stopframe is too busy with other things, and instead just decides to tell him about his mother in an attempt to get him to leave, something that Joe initially has a hard time believing, deciding to head back home instead of just going to see her immediately. Back at the Second Opinions and residence, we get another quick conversation between Joe and his half-sister, where he repeatedly refuses to listen to anything she has to say on the basis of her not actually being his mom, despite the fact that she appears to be the only person in his life who is actually trying to take care of him. Joe eventually storms off to talk to the woman that he believes may be his mother, and this is where we get the first example of what becomes a trend of masterfully well done dialogue between the pair. Both of these characters, even in a town as generally dim-witted as Morrilton, are pretty dense, likely as a result of the trauma they've both faced as a result of Joe's father. But nevertheless, the way that these two communicate is very clearly from two people who are pretty unconcerned about trying to link together eloquent sentences, as we instead get two characters who are constantly saying exactly what they're thinking, leading to heartbreaking sentences like this.
How can I be your mom? I never even hit you.
Eventually, Bendy takes Joe back to her place, where even he is able to tell that she's created a pretend family in lieu of the one that his father ripped away from her. And as they continue talking, with Joe very sweetly deeming her the only other non-dumb person in the entire town, we get what is, in a show with plenty, some of the most gut-wrenching words ever spoken in Moral Orel.
I wish you could have held me when it wasn't him.
Yeah, me too.
After just talking for a few minutes, these two realize how both of their troubled pasts could have been remedied if they were just allowed to spend time together, as they both yearn for a child-parent relationship and have both developed some pretty messed up tendencies as a result. As they continue to realize the pain in their lives as a result of their separation, it quickly turns into anger towards the man responsible for it, as Joe goes home to deliver some delayed justice. And while his sister just watches without any sign of trying to stop him, Joe goes back to confront his father, which eventually evolves into him just completely thrashing him. And while this was done likely just to make the animation a little bit easier, I love how this entire shot is framed from the back of the oven, which forces the audience to focus more on the words and reality of the situation rather than just watching the choreography. You can make an argument whether or not this beatdown was morally acceptable given his father's advanced age and the lack of recollection for what he did to Nurse Bendy, but given Joe's sister's reaction, I think it's fairly evident that at least the episode views this as more than fair. Speaking of which, we get one last conversation between the half-siblings, where they share a sweet moment, as Joe shows some appreciation for all the stuff his sister did, despite not being his mother, while she's just happy that Joe finally knows the truth. The final scene of this episode sees Joe going back to his mother's apartment with a briefcase, only to find her teddy bear Joe in the garbage. When Joe eventually finds his mother at the hospital, after running into Orel and his father returning from their surely shenanigan-filled hunting trip, he asks her why she would throw him away, only for her to respond that she can't see the toy as Joe anymore when she now has the real thing. She mentions wanting to replace her old teddy bear family with Joe, and given the suitcase, it's evident that he wants that too. Something backed up by the fact that we still see them hanging out in the finale, and something backed up by this ridiculously sweet scene between the pair as the credits roll. In general, Moral Orel is a show about all the different ways that hypocrisy, especially religious hypocrisy, destroys relationships. Orel and his family are completely dysfunctional, Doey's parents pay him to pretend that he doesn't exist, Stop Frame pretends that his son isn't his, Censor Doll tortures others based on what her mother did to her, and the list goes on. However, despite the show presenting it as almost inevitable that things end up poorly for its characters, there are definitely some exceptions for people who end the series in a good place, and in every example of such, it's always for the same reason. The characters in Moral Orel with the happiest of endings are the ones that find relationships that make each other happy. It's why Orel achieves his long-term happiness with Christina, it's why Putty achieves his long-term happiness by embracing Stephanie, and it's ultimately why, only when they get past the barrier placed by Dr. Second Opinionson, that Joe and Nurse Bendy can finally have the mother-son relationship they've always wanted. Throughout Dumb, there is an effort to explain both Joe and Nurse Bendy's behavior throughout the series, as the former is a bully who does various despicable things throughout the show, and the latter is an aloof nurse who also participates in some pretty messed up stuff without any semblance of thought. However, after this episode, when looking back at these characters' actions throughout the series, you can see how they got to become the people that they are. Obviously, Joe would become a jerk without any real parents in his life, and obviously Nurse Bendy would just accept that she was too dumb to do anything after her child was taken from her on the basis of it being better if she wasn't around. And all of this is what makes an episode where an 80-year-old man is beaten up for something he has no memory doing somehow the sweetest episode in the entire show, as we see these characters with horrible trauma finally get their lives turned around, and it's only because they're finally able to have the parent-child relationship that they had been so unfairly denied for so long. Something that truly makes for one of the few heartwarming moments in the dark masterpiece that is Moral Orel. Anyway, that's about it for me. Thank you so much to anybody who clicked on this video despite it being a show I don't usually cover, but surprisingly, I do actually watch TV besides Steam Universe or Adventure Time. If you want to tell me how Close Face is actually a sweeter episode in a way that I can't ignore as easily as the comments, you can find my Twitter hidden somewhere in the description. But either way, this has been AmpleSamuel, and I'll see you in about a week with probably another video. Thanks for watching.